Major changes at 95.7 The Game. Damon, Bruce, and Ray Ratto are out. It took some time to hear anything from Damon Bruce, and he announced yesterday that he was laid off. And it was a financial decision. It had nothing to do with his performance on the air. The timing's interesting because I was about to do a review, a head-to-head review of the two sports radio stations in the Bay Area, KMBR and 95.7 The Game. We know KMBR has been around all these years, and they are the giant station. The Giants own a part of KMBR. And then there's 95.7 The Game that has come along as the newer station, as Dan Dibley would say about KMBR, it's old and busted. 95.7 The Game has less commercials, and they tend to break down the games more, and they're not as much of a homer station. KMBR, we know they're homers. You're not going to hear anything that's overly critical of the teams. They're only honest to a point. And I'm sick and tired of KMBR, so although I don't listen to a lot of sports radio these days, my choice for listening is almost always 95.7 The Game. But I've lost interest now in really comparing the two stations. The Game's superior in almost every way. I mean, the fact that there is more sports. KMBR, you can't call them the sports leader because of all the commercials and advertising. But what really surprised us, well, I wasn't totally surprised, but just surprised the way it went down, was when the Damon Bruce show with Ray Ratto, or Ratto and Bruce and Ratto, whatever you want to call it, Damon and Ratto, was going to come on at 3 o'clock. Neither of them were on. And Damon Bruce's song that he always leads off all the shows with on KMBR 680, on 1050, and on The Game was not on. It was just went straight into the show with Whitey Gleason and Alan Stiles, and the fact that both Damon and Ratto were not on tipped me off that something must have happened, because Damon Bruce just came back from a long vacation, or at least that's what we thought it was, and he's gone already again. But one of the main reasons I switched to listen to The Game was because of Damon Bruce. I listened to his first show way back in 2005 on KNBR, and that was after Larry Krueger was fired. And often I'd listen to the background while I was doing some homework back in the old days in high school. And what I always appreciated about Bruce was he wasn't a homer, he wasn't a local, and he did tell it like it was. He was willing to be honest and willing to be critical and say the things that the other shows simply wouldn't. And right away I became a fan, and I continue to listen to him on KMBR, even though KMBR penalized him for this. And what did they do? They wouldn't let him do the Giants home postgame shows. It was Dave Fleming. And then eventually he was banished to KMBR 1050, and I would listen to him on KMBR 1050. And then he signs with The Game. In my opinion, when he went to The Game, that's what gave them credibility more than anyone else in their lineup. And now he's gone. And it's not like he's just a small-time local announcer that was given a chance. I mean, he's been the host of the Jim Rome Show multiple times. In my opinion, he's the type of guy that I like him better solo than teamed up with someone. And that's the big thing about Bay Area sports that I disagree with. It's just all about conversation now. You have to have two, and then they even went overboard a few years ago, three guys together in almost every show, which was way too much. I enjoy someone who can hold a show down by themselves, and there are very few people who can do that. And Damon Bruce did that as well as anyone. And I'm sorry to see him go, and I think it was a mistake by 95-7 the game. And they have a much weaker and thinner lineup now. And from what I know, he was making the most money of any of their announcers or radio personalities. So it's no doubt a financial move. And then Ray Ratto, he's about almost 70 years old, so he was going to be retiring. I'm surprised he was on the radio as long as he was. But while the two of them were together, in my opinion, it was the best show on either of the two stations. And I know sometimes Ray is a little difficult, and he is a little bit difficult of a listen because he's always being difficult. He's negative. But he's honest about his takes and opinions. And although he's been here all these years, he's anything but a homer. So in many ways, this was the most honest and unbiased show, sports show, radio show at least, in the Bay Area. And so much has changed in the landscape because of podcasts, because of all the shows on YouTube. And it's so different because it's just like the way you would view television, because it used to be, well, you'd go to ESPN. Well, ESPN is not so great anymore because you have NFL Network, you have MLB Network, you have NBA TV, and they do a better job on their individual sport than ESPN does. And it's that same way with radio. You have the 49ers experts, you have the Warriors experts, you have the Giants experts and insiders here in the Bay Area, and they go in far more depth in that one sport than you're ever going to get on the radio station. So times have changed, and sports talk and radio has certainly changed. And I was shocked, and I shouldn't have been, when KMBR let Larry Krueger go a second time. Again, I'm not excusing Krueger for what he said the first time he got fired by KMBR. But in my opinion, I think Krueger is the best, just pound for pound, local sports analyst, if you could say, between the three sports, who has a radio show, and now it's the Krug Show. He's on YouTube. But the second time they let him go, you just knew it was so cheap. I mean, you could have your opinions about Rod Brooks, but it kind of tells you all you need to know about KMBR. So they replace Krueger, at least, with Adam Copeland. And he's okay. But he's the guy who's going to just sit there. He's the young guy. He's just going to laugh at all Tom Tolbert's jokes. He doesn't give you much. And then here you have Larry Krueger, who's a former NFL scout. He can talk about the NFL as good as anyone. And they let him go for Copeland? I'm just sitting there saying, oh, brother. And he's obviously very good at baseball and talking the NBA. Krueger. And he has not been hired all this time. And I think it's definitely a reflection. It's very telling about where these sports stations are. The top two all around radio sports announcers in the Bay Area are now without employment by the two local radio stations. In Damon Bruce and Larry Krueger. I think Kruger's knowledge is better than anyone else, but if you're just saying who's the best single host who can run a show, it's Bruce. It's too bad. I was hoping that eventually it was going to be Bruce and Kruger's show when Ratto was out of the picture, but we're not going to see that. And I'm curious to see what happens with Damon Bruce. I don't think Ray Ratto is going to go anywhere. And it's kind of a joke too that almost everyone who was with KMBR eventually ended up on the game. But whether it be a network that picks up Damon Bruce that he signs with, or maybe he will just start his own show online, because that's how things are going. But I have to say, I prefer that now, listening to Kruger, or it depends if you like Grant Cohn or not, on the 49ers. And there's so many of these individual shows and broadcasts that maybe that is the best way to go. And you don't have to rely on the stations. But, the two stations, KMBR is very weak. Let me just go through this real quick. It's not going to be a full review, but let's go through this very quickly. Murph and Mac, how are they still on the air? I mean, for me, they are unlistenable. The only reason people tune into them is because they love the Giants and because Mike Kruko's on. And if they could have Mike Kruko on every single day, they'd have Mike Kruko on every single day. But Murphy is the biggest homer, at least Giants homer, in the Bay Area. Is he not? The only person, in my opinion, that's really worth listening to in the day lineup at KMBR is Greg Papa. But even Greg Papa can't be overly critical of the 49ers because of the fact he works for them. Tom Tolbert, he has a lifetime contract with KMBR. I can see why people like him. I've never loved him. I just think, okay. He's all right. I already said how I feel about Copeland, and I'll listen to Marty Lurie doing some Giants over the weekend, but Marty Lurie's different. With the game, I do like that they bring more intensity with their shows, and Bonte Hill and Joe Shasky certainly do that, and they are the opposite. They are the antithesis to KMBR, and it's a welcome change. And for many people, that's their favorite show on the game. I like it, but even for me, sometimes they're almost too homery. Certainly nothing like Murph and Mac. They'll criticize the teams. They'll be fair. But, they're coming into the station and they're all decked out in their home gear for the 49ers, the Giants, and the Warriors. Sometimes for me, they still go a little too far for my liking. The Willard and Dibb show is decent. Not great, but it's decent. I just don't exactly understand them moving that and putting it up against Tom Tolbert. And apparently, which it was quite an achievement, that Damon and Ratto actually were beating Tolbert's show in the afternoon with ratings. For me, the weakest show on the game was Steinmetz and Guru. I think Daryl the Guru Johnson's okay when he's teamed up with the right person. I don't like these two together. Steinmetz was decent on NBA this week, and I liked it better when it was NBA this week instead of Warriors this week. And that's my complaint with local sports radio shows is, can you mix it up and put a little more national sports in there? Can you not just beat us to death with those three teams on one side of the bay? Warriors, Giants, 49ers. I know it's primarily about them, as it should be. But it was better when the game started out and they had Raiders. They had A's, and I know the Raiders are gone and the A's might as well not even exist. This is a decision that the game is going to regret. And it's sad when you see someone like Kruger out of a job with the radio stations, and then Bruce, of all people, is out at KMBR, out at 95.7 The Game. And they are better off doing their own shows or going elsewhere. And that's the state of Bay Area sports radio.